Night eats the block on Maple Street, thin frost glowing under one street lamp. A room breathes fear. Metal clinks. A mother sits shackled, wrists ringed in bruised circles, as a man lifts a stick like punctuation at the end of a bad sentence. Then, everything fractures. A white flash. Cold floods in. Snow presses against skin. Piper Lane blinks awake to the taste of copper and winter. The last minutes spool in her head like film. A door pried, a hallway sprint, a wind that cut like wire. She is outside now, half buried, small legs shaking against the asphalt's icy grit. Breathing rasps. The world narrows to stars, to a distant siren, to a will that refuses to lie down. She pushes up. The night pushes back. A thin cry slips out anyway, thin as thread. Just enough sound to change a trajectory. Patrol patterns are muscle memory for Officer Ethan Cole. Glance left, scan alleys, feel the weather inside your bones. Beside him, Rex K9 moves like a shadow with purpose, ears angling to every hinge squeak and tire hiss. The cry reaches them sideways, small, sharp, and urgent enough to stop both man and dog mid-stride. Rex's head snaps toward the sound, nostrils tasting cold air, pupils bright with work. Ethan loosens the lead, reading his partner's body the way rookies read manuals. The dog's chest expands, the tail hardens into a single line. Track engaged. Snow carries the story in freckles and half moons. A sock print, a spatter no wider than a coin. The streetlight flickers like it's watching. Dispatch crackles into the night, but the real conversation is between scent and instinct. Rex chooses a direction. Ethan follows, without argument.
Behind a sagging fence, the trail turns. Rex drops into a focused trot, head low, breath coiling in white ropes. The shape in the snow is small, curled against a brick wall like something the cold forgot. Piper lifts her face as the dog arrives, eyes cloudy with shock. Ethan kneels and assesses without panic. Airway, color, reaction to touch, the tremble that means she is still fighting. He radios EMS, location clipped and precise, then shrugs off his jacket. Rex does what he was built to do when orders meet need. He folds against Piper's side, matching her shape, trading his heat for hers. Her hand finds his fur and locks there, a lifeline made of warmth and heartbeat. Her breathing evens by fractions. The siren is minutes away, but minutes are long in winter. They hold the line together until help finds them. Stabilization buys a window. Ethan speaks to the medics in procedure, then reads the story the snow is still telling. Direction of flight leans west, footprints angle narrow like a child running with pain. Rex looks back for his handler's decision, the question written in his shoulders. Green light comes as a touch to the harness. Track. They move again, threading alleys that smell like oil and old mail. A chain-link kiss scratches Ethan's sleeve as he clears a corner. The pattern tightens. Freckles of blood grow farther apart, then vanish where the wind scoured the sidewalk clean. Rex does not stop. He ladders to scent, canvassing curbs and hedges, mapping invisible currents. A cul-de-sac opens like a held breath. One porch light is dead where others glow. Curtains tremble once, then still. Ethan feels the quiet of a house pretending to be empty.
Tidy siding. A welcome mat that has never meant it. A swing that creaks though there is no wind. Ethan positions for angles, announces, and waits for a response that does not come. Inside, the air has that heavy hush of secrets held too long. Rex noses the threshold, then glances back. Permission. They step in with practiced caution, beam cutting through dust motes, senses parsing temperature shifts and faint metallic ghosts. The hallway smells like bleach layered over mildew. There is a beat of silence where the house seems to listen to them. A stairwell yawns to the right, cold air lifting from below. On the landing, a small ribbon of fabric is caught like a surrendered flag. Ethan calls it in, marks time, marks place, marks the thin thread of dread knitting the rooms together. The dog's hackles rise, not from fear, but from certainty. The basement door is painted the same color as the wall, hinge screws worn by hands that open it often. A draft brushes Ethan's knuckles when he touches the knob. He tests the panel, locked, then knocks along the frame, listening for hollows. On the third tap, the sound changes, a deeper cavity answering back. Rex steps in front of the door and plants there, muscles stacked, tail low, chest humming with a contained bark. He won't pass the wall seam to the left, a line where paint wrinkles over something not quite flush. Ethan calls for a breach team, logs the oddities on body cam, and maps the room's geometry in quick mental chalk. Above them, a floorboard pops. The house exhales through vents, the faintest whistle threading the air. Somewhere, a clock ticks without emotion. The lock gives way, and the darkness beyond feels lived in.
Light corridors cut through the black as officers fan out, boots clicking on concrete that sweats with old damp. The smell is undeniable. Bleach fighting mildew, metal riding over both. In a hidden room, behind a panel that pretends to be a wall, a woman sits shackled to an eye bolt sunk into stone. Rachel Lane blinks against the light, lips split, hands trembling from cold and time. The narrative tries to rewrite itself, but the scene insists. She is not a silent accomplice, she is captive. Ethan signals medical priority while scanning for secondary threats. Rex sweeps the perimeter with a nose that can argue with paint. But chain is thick where it meets the cuff. The cuff is too tight for a wrist that thin. Someone upstairs shifts weight. The sound carries through beams and into bone. The house is not done answering. A thud upstairs becomes a cascade of feet. The suspect darts for the back hall, weight heavy on heels, breathing chopped into angry pieces. Ethan clears the corner as Rex surges ahead, launched by a word that means control, not rage. The landing is narrow, the rails too loose, the angle bad for a clumsy tackle. The dog is not clumsy. He intercepts with a trained hold, a grip that fixes without tearing, that immobilizes without excess. Wood complains. The suspect stops being motion and becomes evidence. Cuffs click, the sound neat as a period at the end of a sentence that has run on too long. Ethan checks for weapons, clears the adjoining rooms, and logs the capture. Downstairs, medics move toward Rachel with blankets and bolt cutters. The house has given up its first secret. The worst kinds never travel alone.
Rex returns to the basement and orbits the space like a compass finding north. At the workbench, the dog's nose hooks on a scent brighter than dust. Oil, skin, battery heat, the ghost of a ringtone. He paws once on a plank where scuffs arc outward. Ethan kneels, probes the seam, and lifts a board that has been lifted before. A phone lies in the dark pocket like a confession waiting for its reader. It wakes to a lock screen and a list of app icons arranged too carefully. Detective Owen Briggs bags it, preserves prints, and nudges it into analysis mode. Even the home screen whispers a history. Calendar entries named nothing, voice memos marked with dates that match nothing good. Somewhere on it, a truth is waiting with its hands up. Rex sits and watches the human part of the hunt resume. Thumbnail grids form on a forensic monitor like a city seen from above. Time-stamped squares with flat faces inside. Briggs reviews with the quiet of someone who knows each click costs something. The first wife appears in low light, her voice a sawed-off whisper, her movements flinching in patterns that don't happen by choice. In one clip, a belt slides through loops with a hiss that solves an earlier question. Prior acts form a spine that prosecutors can stand on if the rules allow it. The dates bracket marriages and addresses like pins on a map.
Pattern evidence ceases to be rumor and takes on the weight of a trend line. Ethan files these pieces under a single word that matters more than any adjective: corroboration. Outside, Frost climbs the basement windows and breaks into fronds that look like small, stubborn trees. Back at the vent, Ethan hears what Piper once heard through fear: the thin, reedy hum of moving air through a return that is not entirely clear. Rex presses his muzzle to the grate and pulls back, sneezing at dust and old skin. The alert posture is unmistakable: head point, ear angle, the hush before a bark. The screws bite hard, but a driver persuades them into a little metal choir. Inside, something gleams where it should not. The belt buckle is small, with a finish worn smooth at the edges. A smear on its underside oxidizes into the color of old roses. Chain of custody feels like an oath when hands change places. Piper's diary dates speak from memory. This object speaks from steel. Together, they start to feel like a conversation the defense will not enjoy interrupting. Behind a shelving unit, a shallow void hides a small notebook the color of pewter rain. Its corners are softened by fingers and time. The handwriting is uneven, the spacing child-sincere. Entries are short because fear compresses language. A date, a place, a sound described in careful words. Here, the cold that made breath look like smoke. There, the number of lines scratched into concrete to measure hours without clocks. One page has a water stain with a map's patience. Another bears a teardrop crater where ink and salt changed each other. Forensics will argue the ink's age, the paper's humidity scars, the dust that settled in layers between readings. For now, the book is a voice that never had a microphone. Rex sits beside the table as if guarding a witness who cannot yet enter the room.
In an evidence bay, bright as a surgical theater, two bags trade hands under camera. A label lifted on one corner betrays a hurried stick. Briggs pauses, breathes, corrects, and narrates each step into the body cam with the patience of a parent tying a shoe on a moving bus. The moment matters because the defense will try to make it matter more. Photographs capture the correction. Forms gather signatures like small shields. The phone goes to one locker, the buckle to another, the notebook to a third. Their paths branching in a diagram that looks like a tree refusing to grow crooked. Rex stands in the doorway with Ethan's hand resting on his ruff, both of them still in their own ways. The case has bones now, but bones are only strong when they knit where the breaks once were. Fluorescent light makes everything look too clean, but Dr. Naomi Brooks sees past the glare. She reads the language of bruises and rib guarding, the pallor that speaks of long hunger, the scalp flaking that winter can't entirely explain. She notes the malnutrition markers, the cold exposure, the tenderness that suggests fracture without panic. She writes without adjectives, because adjectives are not evidence. Piper's hands still shake until a large head finds her lap and parks there. Exceptions are granted when medicine understands that bodies are not the only things needing care. Rex's presence steadies the oxygen numbers on a screen that does not care about comfort. The chart grows into a story the jury will accept because numbers are hard to shout down. Outside the room, snow eases, not because the world is kinder, but because weather changes when it wants.
Ethan finishes emergency filings with a keyboard soft percussion, moving through forms that exist because nights like this exist too often. Protective orders populate. Temporary placement is arranged with a foster family whose porch light tends to stay on. Paper does not feel heroic, but paper builds fences that hold. Piper sleeps at last with a blanket tucked to her chin and a dog at her feet. Monitor beeps moving into a rhythm that sounds almost like a lullaby. Ethan waits in the hall where scuffs climb the wall at knee height, evidence that many have stood and leaned here before. He does not speak promises out loud. He carries them as posture, as presence, as a decision to return tomorrow and the next tomorrow after that. Some vows are louder in the quiet. In a windowless room that hums with aging HVAC and humming minds, ADA Paige Ellison arrays the pace on cork and screen. She draws a line from the night of the rescue back through weeks and months, pinning dates with photographs and logs. Canine alert records, body cam timestamps, Dr. Brooks's intake notes, the diary's entries, the hidden phone's metadata, and the Buckles lab progress form a braid instead of a stack. Briggs reheats coffee to the temperature of resolve. Ethan contributes behavior notes only when they matter, keeping Rex's heroism aligned with procedure rather than myth. The plan is simple because simple survives cross-examination. Let time tell the truth. Let science keep it honest. Let courage breathe where it needs to. Outside, courthouse pigeons trade places like jurors will later do with their thoughts.
Colt Riker's counsel previews 2 attacks, coaching and force. They will call the diary a script, the child a vessel, the mother a liar, the dog a weapon swung too freely. They will clutch at that mislabeled bag and pretend it is a ruined bridge rather than a patched plank. Judge Marian Keller meets counsel with a face like a clean ledger. She will allow Rex Canine as support for Piper, she says, but her courtroom will not become theater. Cameras may record, but they will not perform. Rules of evidence will admit prior acts only where pattern is more than prejudice. She cuts through grandstanding with calm that moves faster than gavel would. In the cheap seats, whispers rise and fall like a tide. Trials are stories with rules. Everyone is already telling theirs, and the jury has not yet heard Chapter 1. A technician explains what time does to ink when air is wet and concrete sweats. Microscopy shows feathering and strokes that happen only when paper absorbs damp slowly. Chemical assays place the writing in the months the entries claim, not last week's convenience. Fibers hold dust as trees hold rings, recording seasons whether anyone asks or not. An acoustics engineer testifies about the vent's whistle, the frequency of a thin hum produced by partial blockage at the mouth of a return. Measurements taken after the breach match Piper's description of the sound she used to count hours. The belt buckle bears trace blood and minute scratches that align with a belt set found in a dresser upstairs. Each small truth clicks into the next. The picture forming is not dramatic, it is stubborn. Stubborn is how justice often wins.
Rachel's story arrives in records rather than speeches, unsent messages with drafted pleas, call attempts cut short, a location history that ends at the basement door too many days in a row. Dr. Brooks's notes record wrist abrasions consistent with restraint, bruising not consistent with defensive harm to others. Prosecutors stop short of making her a hero. They don't have to. The shackles did that work. A witness from a shelter explains what dependence and isolation do to a decision tree. The narrative that once painted Rachel as willing becomes thinner than paper. She is not absolved by proxy. She is recontextualized by facts. Piper watches with a face that is too careful for her age, hands folded in her lap, Rex's ear beneath her palm like a living stone she can hold onto when the floor feels like water. The day Piper speaks, the room holds quiet like breath held underwater. She enters in measured steps that refuse to hurry or hide. Rex settles beside the witness chair, chin on paws, eyes on her shoes. The jury sees a dog do nothing dramatic and understands it as discipline, not indifference. Paige keeps questions simple, scaffolding memory rather than mining it. Piper looks at points on the wall as if reading from a map she drew to find her way out. Her voice does not try to be brave, it just tries to be there. Ethan sits behind, posture open, ready if needed, invisible if not. Judge Keller watches like a lighthouse, steady, useful, never the story, but always present. Outside the courthouse windows, a bus gasps and leaves. Inside,
The room listens without blinking.
Piper lays out nights as a ledger does. What, where, when, how long. She recounts the whistle of the return vent that taught her hours had edges. She explains concrete lines she scratched with a chipped washer, a child's calendar marking survival rather than holidays. She tells the court the cold that made breath look like ghosts and the hunger that taught bones the names of their edges. Page does not ask for adjectives. The jurors supply their own as faces shift from neutral to human. Rex yawns quietly, a slow gesture that somehow softens the air near Piper's knees. Dr. Brooks's earlier charts now feel less like numbers and more like coordinates on a map the jury can read. Across the aisle, defense notes look busy without growing heavier. The story's weight has begun to settle where it belongs. Memory is not a road. It is a field full of holes. Piper finds one without meaning to. Her breath catches, eyes glaze, hands curl white. Panic rises like fast weather. Before anyone can decide how to help, Rex lifts one paw and lays it gently against her shoe, then leaves it there as if pinning the moment to the floor. The gesture is small enough to be missed by cameras and big enough to reroute a storm. Piper's lungs remember counting. She anchors to the steady rhythm pressed against her. She names the vent again and adds what her body finally grants, the exact corner where airflow sounded narrowest, the spot where something metal rattled at night. Page marks the detail as if placing a thumbtack on a map. The room exhales as a unit. The story moves forward again.
Briggs returns to the house with a sound meter and a patience that has always served him better than adrenaline. Measurements taken at the vent's mouth match the frequency described. The duct's turn scrapes metal against metal where a small object wedges airflow. The belt buckle's edges correspond to tiny scuffs inside the return. Trace lifted from the buckle echoes Piper's blood profile and amounts minute but meaningful. Photographs are retaken under better light with rulers that leave no room for guessing scale. Chain of custody logs grow thicker by another round of signatures that look more like accountability than bureaucracy. The report reads like a recipe that was finally followed correctly. When Page submits it, the defense's shoulders drop in a way they pretend is relaxation. The jury now has a physical latch to hold whenever words blur. The hidden phone gives more than anyone wanted. Metadata places recordings at addresses tied to Colt. Timestamps grow like rings around earlier incidents, placing harm in a pattern not explained by bad nights. A prior wife appears again in pixelated testimony, her injuries documented by a camera that wanted to be a trophy but becomes a witness. The court allows limited prior acts use because pattern is not garnish, it is the dish. The belt hiss from those clips matches the scrape sound noted in Piper's diary and the scuffs nested in the vent. It is ugly without being graphic, heavy without being theatrical. The room absorbs it like a stone dropped into deep water. Ripples reach every row. Rex does not look at the screen. He watches Piper instead, deciding where to be if her breathing changes.
The claim of excessive force lands with a thud against video that refuses to lie. Ethan's body cam shows a textbook approach, verbal commands, space assessment, the release command ready before the hold even begins. Rex's bite charts within policy windows, grip where training says it should be, duration documented to the second. A trainer explains proportionality in terms that do not require a law degree to follow. Canine work is not mythology, he says without saying it. It is math. Angles, pressure, timing, release. The footage mirrors his words with a calm that drains heat from the accusation. The jurors watch, heads tilted, as if learning how a lock works by watching a key. The narrative that tried to paint chaos instead outlines discipline. Page lets the silence afterward do its own closing. Page meets the chain of custody attack head-on, projecting the corrected label and the body cam narrative that captured the fix as it happened. She walks the jury through why perfection is a myth and transparency is the real safeguard. The technician who made the error testifies without flinch, owning the moment and describing the redundant systems that prevented harm. Errors confessed lose their weapon teeth. The jurors seem to appreciate being treated like adults with attention spans. Defense objects out of duty, then sits down with less wind. In a corner of the gallery, someone coughs like punctuation. Rex sleeps in that unconvincing way dogs do when they are actually listening. Piper rests a palm on his shoulder. Touch is not evidence. It is endurance. The court allows both to coexist for once.
Page threads a closing that refuses melodrama. She builds a spine of time and lets the jury carry weight rather than be crushed by it. A dog's alerts are not magic, they are measurable. A child's diary is not theater, it is dated. A hidden phone is not gossip, it is metadata. A buckle is not a metaphor, it is metal that remembers collisions. She asks the room to consider not just what happened, but how carefully it has been shown. Defense replies with what-ifs that feel like smoke in a building already mapped. Judge Keller thanks counsel with the tone of a teacher ending a class that covered hard truth without breaking anyone. The jury departs with notebooks full and eyes a little older. When verdict time arrives, everything in the courtroom slows to the speed of paper. The clerk reads counts that land like anchors in a harbor too long stormed. Aggravated child abuse, unlawful confinement, sentences stacked in a way that honors the calendar Piper once carved into concrete. Protective orders extend like fences that finally reach the property line. Rachel receives services and a path out that does not pretend to be simple. Ethan stands still in a way that feels like relief disguised as fatigue. Rex blinks, then yawns, then lays his chin back down as if the earth finally leveled. Page nods once, a punctuation mark at the end of a paragraph that needed to end.
Healing arrives, disguised as small habits. A foster home leaves the porch light on, not because someone will be late, but because light feels like permission to enter. Warm milk steadies hands better than speeches do. Piper practices reading on the steps at sunset, voice finding edges it did not know it had. Scheduled visits bring Rex in on weekends by court order, but he would have come anyway if paperwork were feelings. They walk slow loops around a block that has learned her new name. Ethan waves from the sidewalk, not intruding, just available. Dr. Brooks's follow-ups measure gains with numbers that feel like blessings with clipboards. Detective Briggs drives by less often as days stack without alarms. The world is not fixed. The world is held together by the people who keep choosing to hold it. At last light, a book opens and words rise like birds startled from a field. Piper reads aloud to a listener who does not interrupt. Rex's tail thumps the porch rhythm, a metronome for a voice that once shook like leaves. Ethan leans against the gatepost and lets the scene happen without witnesses except the sky. This is not a triumph shot. It is a maintenance shot, the honest work of staying okay after getting there. Somewhere far away, a courtroom empties. Somewhere closer, a heater hums without whistling, because the vent is finally clear. The porch boards hold 3 weights comfortably. 1 man, 1 dog, 1 girl. The story does not promise never again. It promises not tonight. In this house, the light stays on for reasons that have nothing to do with fear.